The emergency council chambers emptied slowly after the vote. 4 hours of heated debate had ended with a decision that would alter humanity's trajectory forever. Earth would answer the Luminae's call. Dr. Eleanor Hayes lingered in her seat, both exhilarated and terrified by what they'd set in motion. The holographic projection of the crystalline alien face still hovered above the central table, its features contorted in what she'd come to recognize as desperate fear. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Admiral Rice said, dropping heavily into the chair beside her. The scared veteran's prosthetic hand whirred softly as he pushed a steaming mug of coffee toward her. "What if we're making a mistake?" Hayes asked quietly. "They've been watching us for centuries, Victor. They've seen our wars, our cruelty, our self-destructive tendencies, yet they specifically asked for us. What does that say about the threat they're facing?" Ray's weathered face creased in a humorless smile. "It says they're desperate enough to call the most dangerous species they know." The quantum communicator on Hayes' wrist pulsed, displaying new data from the Estrella Observatory. "They're sending more," she murmured, eyes widening as she scanned the incoming transmission. "Coordinates, star charts, and technical specifications." "For what?" "Technology we don't possess yet," Hayes said, her voice hushed with wonder. "Advanced propulsion theory that could reduce our travel time by decades. They're not just asking for help. They're giving us the means to reach them." Within 24 hours, engineering teams worldwide began working to implement the Luminae specifications. What would have taken human science generations to develop independently started taking shape in hangars and orbital platforms across the globe. 7 weeks later, Hayes stood on the observation deck of the UES Dauntless, watching Earth shrink to a pale blue dot against the vastness of space. The experimental jump-fold engines hummed beneath her feet, channeling energies humans barely understood. "We're ready for the first fold," Captain Navarro announced over the shipwide comms. "All personnel, secure for dimensional transition." Hayes glanced across the deck where Admiral Rice stood ramrod straight, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. Around them, 15 other vessels of Earth's hastily assembled Salvation Fleet prepared to make the leap that would carry humans farther than they'd ever gone before. "They've given us technology beyond our comprehension," Hayes said softly, joining Rice at the viewport. "Why trust us with it? What if we use it against them once we arrive?" Rice considered her question for a long moment. "That's the thing about desperation, Eleanor. It leaves no room for caution." He turned to face her fully, his expression grave. "But here's what keeps me awake at night. What exactly did they see in our history that made them think humans were their best option? What qualities are they counting on that we might not want to acknowledge in ourselves?" The jump-fold engines reached full capacity, reality shimmering around the fleet as space-time itself prepared to bend to human will, guided by alien knowledge freely given in their darkest hour. Initiating fold, came the announcement, as stars stretched into brilliant lines. Hayes clutched the railing as the Dauntless surged forward, carrying humanity toward its first encounter with the cosmic horror that had driven an advanced civilization to place its survival in the hands of violent primitives from a backwater star system. "Whatever they need from us," Rice said grimly as the universe twisted around them, "I suspect it won't be our diplomacy, our art, or our philosophy. They're calling on humanity's darkness, Eleanor. Let's hope we can control it once we unleash it." The human delegation followed Sentinel Illyrian through floating corridors that seemed to defy not just gravity but conventional architecture itself. Passages opened before them without visible doors, ceilings soared and contracted based on some aesthetic principle beyond human comprehension, and the entire structure thrummed with harmonies just at the edge of audible range. "Their entire civilization is essentially a massive musical instrument," Dr. Hayes whispered to Rice, her neural interface struggling to translate the complex light patterns surrounding them. "Every structure is tuned to resonate with specific frequencies." "Nice concert hall," Rice muttered. "Terrible fortress." The grand chamber they entered defied human language. Crystalline pillars rose hundreds of meters to a ceiling that appeared simultaneously transparent and reflective, showing both the stars above and the gathered assembly below. Thousands of luminae stood in concentric circles, their luminous bodies creating a living tapestry of light and color that shifted in complex patterns. They're singing your biography, Hayes realized with sudden clarity, her neural interface warming against her temple as it processed the information. Every luminae here is contributing to a collective composition about human history. What are they saying about us? Rise asked, noticing how the patterns darkened when focused on him specifically. Hayes swallowed hard. They're cataloging our wars, our weapons development, our capacity for strategic violence. They're admiring it. Alarian gestured the delegation toward a central platform where the council awaited. The eldest luminae, ancient beings whose light pulsed with slower, deeper rhythms, observed the humans with multifaceted eyes that reflected internal constellations. We witnessed the defenders, Alarian announced, the neural interface translating his light speech into words. Those who understand the necessity of darkness. We understand survival, Rais corrected firmly. And after seeing your world, I understand why you called us. You have no concept of defense because you've never needed it. The Admiral stepped forward, addressing the council directly. Your cities are beautiful and completely indefensible. Your technology is miraculous, but entirely non-weaponized. You've evolved without predators, without competition, without the existential pressures that shaped humanity. A ripple of changing light patterns spread through the assembled luminae as Hayes struggled to translate the complex emotional responses. They don't have a word for weapon, she realized aloud. The closest concept translates as harm maker, and it's associated with profound cultural taboo. Yet you called specifically for humans, Rise pressed, locking eyes with Ilarion. Not just for our technology, but for us. Why? Ilarion's light patterns shifted to frequencies that caused several humans to wince as their neural interfaces struggled to adapt. The void consumes light, he explained. It harvests consciousness, absorbs knowledge, and grows stronger with each civilization it devours. We can create, nurture, and enlighten, but we cannot destroy. We cannot even comprehend destruction as a concept necessary for survival. And that's where we come in, Rais concluded grimly. You evolved on a world where death was a constant companion, Ilarion continued, where survival required not just adaptation, but the capacity to end threats permanently. The concept is alien to us, but we have observed that humans possess something unique in our experience. You understand darkness without becoming it. Hayes watched Raya's expression harden as the full implications became clear. You haven't just invited us to help defend your civilization, he said quietly. You've invited us to weaponize it. The chamber fell into perfect stillness as the council's light patterns synchronized in affirmation. Yes, Ilarion acknowledged simply. To survive the void, we must become something we have never been. You will teach us how. Deep within the repurposed Luminae resonance chamber that now served as the human command center, Dr. Hayes and Admiral Rice studied the recovered footage from the Herm scout ship. The recording played on loop, each viewing more disturbing than the last. Tendrils of absolute darkness methodically dismantling the Luminae outpost, pulling luminous beings into a central mass that pulsed with stolen light. Look at the precision, Rice noted, freezing the frame where multiple tendrils simultaneously breached different structures. Perfect geometric distribution, optimal resource allocation, no wasted movement. Hayes nodded, her expression grim. Like watching a computer program execute, the void operates with mathematical perfection, but there's no creativity, no adaptation to unexpected variables. And that's our advantage, Rice said, straightening up. They can't improvise. They follow optimal patterns because they've never needed to develop tactical flexibility. Lieutenant Takano entered with a data tablet, her usual confidence subdued after reviewing the footage. We've completed the pattern analysis, sir. The void attacks in predictable sequences, always prioritizing energy sources in descending order of magnitude, always using the same approach vectors relative to planetary rotation. Good work. Begin designing countermeasures that exploit these patterns, Reyes ordered. We need to introduce variables their algorithm can't anticipate. As Takata departed, young Ilaris slipped into the chamber, her light patterns dimmed to near-human visibility levels, an adaptation she'd developed to work alongside the Earth forces. "The Council is requesting your presence," she informed them, her translated voice carrying unusual harmonic undertones. "The extraction operations have encountered resistance." Hayes and Reyes exchanged knowing glances. The resistance had been building for days as humans systematically transformed the Lumine paradise into a defensible position. Mining operations scaring pristine landscapes, crystal spires reinforced with metallic support structures, and ancient energy gardens repurposed for weapons testing. The council chamber no longer resembled the harmonious gathering space of their first meeting. Temporary partitions divided the vast room into functional sectors. Holographic displays showing planetary defense grids replaced the artistic light patterns, and human technicians worked alongside increasingly agitated Lumine elders. "This sacred mountain has stood untouched for 12,000 years. Elder Luminex protested, his light patterns sharply discordant as he gestured toward a holographic display of the ongoing excavation. "Your machines have carved it hollow in 7 days. And now it houses an emergency shelter that can protect 60,000 of your people," Reyes replied evenly. "The mountain still stands. Its purpose has changed. You've established caste prioritization in our evacuation protocols," another elder objected. "Separating essential and non-essential citizens violates our fundamental belief that all light is equally precious." Hayes stepped forward, attempting mediation. "We understand these changes feel violent to your cultural systems, but the void won't respect your beliefs or traditions. It will consume indiscriminately." "There is difference between change and desecration," Luminex countered, his light flaring. "You've taken our harmonic resonators, instruments of creation and communion, and weaponized them." "Because they work," Reyes said simply. "Reconfigured, they can disrupt the void's neural patterns. We're using what tools exist." As the argument intensified, Hayes noticed Ilaris hanging back, her light patterns shifting in unusual sequences. When the formal meeting concluded without resolution, the young Lumine approached her privately. "There's something the council isn't telling you," Ilaris whispered, checking to ensure they weren't observed. "About why the void hunts us specifically." Hayes leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "The void doesn't choose targets randomly. It hunts species approaching specific evolutionary thresholds, particularly consciousness acceleration." Ilaris' light dimmed further. "We're not just its prey. We're its competition." The observation deck of the Dauntless fell silent as survivors watched the last debris from Serenity's outer habitats disperse into the void of space. Commander Novik's final transmission still echoed in their minds, not desperate pleas or tearful goodbyes, but calm tactical updates until the very moment her Nova bomb detonated. Approaching target, shields failing, core temperature rising, mission parameters achieved. Nova detonation in 3, 2, static. Then the blinding light that temporarily severed the void's neural connections, forcing its retreat and saving millions of Lumine in the inner habitats. Dr. Hayes found Ilaris on the far side of the observation deck, her luminous form dimmed to a faint glow that humans had come to recognize as morning. "I don't understand," Ilaris whispered when Hayes approached. Commander Novik knew with absolute certainty that her actions would end her existence, yet she proceeded with clear purpose, even serenity. Her light patterns pulsed with confused grief. "How does one choose non-existence? It defies all rational thought." Hayes considered her response carefully. "Humans live with our mortality from the moment we're born. We understand our lives are finite. That makes how we use that time, and sometimes how we end it, deeply meaningful." "She sacrificed herself to save others," Ilaris said slowly, testing the concept. "But the choice was hers. That's what makes it sacrifice, not tragedy, Hayes confirmed. The difference matters to us. Across the deck, Admiral Rice stood reviewing casualty reports, his face carved from stone. 30% of human forces lost, including all 13 volunteers in Novik's squadron. The tactical victory had come at devastating cost. Admiral, a communications officer called. The Lumine Council is requesting your presence. They've convened an emergency session. The council chamber had been reconfigured yet again, its harmonious design now replaced by functional workstations and tactical displays. The Elder's light patterns shimmered with discordant emotions as Reyes entered. We have reviewed your combat recordings. Elder Luminix began, his translation rendered in formal tones. The loss of human life exceeds acceptable parameters. We propose withdrawal to the outer system, sacrificing uninhabited moons to buy time for diplomatic solutions. Reyes' expression didn't change. There are no diplomatic solutions with the Void. It doesn't negotiate. It consumes. We cannot sanction more death. Another elder insisted. Commander Novak and her squadron made their choice. Reyes cut in sharply. A choice that saved millions of your people. This was merely their advance force. The main Void collective approaches, and it will have adapted to our initial tactics. He stepped toward the central holographic display, activating a simulation of the coming battle. We need to stop viewing our casualties as failures. Every voluntary sacrifice today prevents 1,000 forced ones tomorrow. As the Admiral departed, Hayes lingered, her neural interface detecting something unprecedented in the Council's light patterns. Running a quick spectral analysis through her datapad, she gasped at the results. What is it? Her assistant asked. Their communication frequencies are shifting, Hayes whispered. They're adapting their light patterns to match human neural wavelengths. They're literally rewiring themselves to understand us. Later that night, Hayes found Ilaris waiting outside her quarters, the young Lumine's light patterns steadier than before. I've been assigned to your research team permanently, Ilaris explained. The Council wants me to study something specific about humans. What's that? Sacrifice, Ilaris replied, her light patterns forming complex new harmonies. They need to understand why Commander Novik chose certain death. They believe this understanding may be essential to our survival. She hesitated before adding, I volunteered for neural resonance training with human emotional patterns. That's potentially dangerous to your cognitive structures, Hayes cautioned. Yes, Elaris agreed simply. But as I'm beginning to understand, survival sometimes requires risk. Commander Novik taught me that. The neural integration chamber hummed with combined human and Lumine technology, its crystalline walls pulsing with light that synchronized with the vital signs of the two beings at its center. Major Diana Chen lay perfectly still on one platform, her military-grade neural implants exposed at the base of her skull. Across from her, Elaris hovered in suspension, her luminous form cycling through colors that reflected her nervous anticipation. Neural synchronization at 67%, the luminous scientist announced, higher than any previous simulation. Dr. Hayes watched through a resonance-shielded window, her fingers nervously tapping against her datapad. Their brainwave patterns are already beginning to harmonize. Chen's theta waves are adopting Lumine frequencies, and Ilaris is developing human-like gamma bursts, added the scientist. Unprecedented neural plasticity. Admiral Reyes stood silently beside Hayes, his expression unreadable. How dangerous is this, really? Hayes hesitated before answering truthfully. Best case scenario. They create a functional hybrid consciousness that maintains both individuals' core identities while sharing capabilities. Worst case, neural cascade failure resulting in immediate brain death for both. Chen volunteered with full knowledge, Reyes noted. But did Ilaris truly understand the risk? I believe I did, came a voice from behind them. Chen's voice, but with harmonic undertones that no human throat could produce. They turned to find Chen/Ilaris standing in the doorway, their merged form radiating subtle light patterns that shifted with their breathing. Hayes gasped. The integration. You're already complete. Chen/Elaris finished, their shared consciousness flowing seamlessly between expressions, and more successful than anticipated. They stepped forward with fluid grace that combined military precision and lumine elegance. Chen's dark eyes now contained pinpoints of light that shifted like internal constellations, while Ilaris's luminous form had taken on more defined edges that resembled a human silhouette. "How does it feel?" Hayes asked hesitantly. "Expanded," they answered simply. "I can perceive energy flows through matter." Chen's precise diction. "I understand the tactical advantage of self-sacrifice." Ilaris's melodic inflection. "We are both. We are more." The lead scientist approached with scanning equipment. "Neural pattern stability is remarkable. The integration appears permanent. We're detecting structural changes in both nervous systems." "Worth it," Chen/Elaris responded without hesitation. "We can perceive pathways through the void's defenses that neither of us could see alone. The infiltration will succeed." Across the facility, preparation for the mission accelerated. The specialized vessel designed to penetrate the void's outer membrane underwent final modifications based on Chen/Elaris's unique perceptions. Meanwhile, the combined fleet prepared for what everyone recognized as a suicide mission, to engage the main void force as a diversion. In the tactical briefing, Rise addressed the assembled commanders with characteristic bluntness. "This is not a battle we can win conventionally. Our objective is simple: survive long enough for the infiltration team to complete their mission." "And if they fail?" a Lumine commander asked, his light patterns betraying anxiety. Rise met his gaze steadily. "Then we ensure the void pays the highest possible price for its victory." Later, as the infiltration vessel prepared for launch, Hayes found Chen/Elaris in the observation bay, watching distant stars. "Are you afraid?" Hayes asked quietly. "Chen knows fear as an old companion," they answered. "Elaris is experiencing it for the first time. Together, we find it clarifying." They turned to face her, their merged expression oddly peaceful. "Don't mourn us if we don't return. This joining has already given us more than either life could have experienced alone." As the small team boarded their vessel, a junior officer approached Rise with a question that had been on many minds. "How will we know if they've succeeded?" The Admiral's gaze remained fixed on the departing ship as he answered, "If we're still alive in 12 hours, they haven't failed yet." The corridors of the Void's central node narrowed as the infiltration team pushed deeper, the organic walls pulsing with stolen consciousnesses. Lieutenant Park's scanner emitted soft chirps as it cataloged biological markers from extinct civilizations. 7 distinct species, he whispered, the device trembling in his hand, each with evolutionary markers suggesting advanced sentience. Chen/Elaris led the team through the living labyrinth, their hybrid perception identifying pathways invisible to others. "This way," they directed, moving with preternatural confidence. "The consciousness chamber lies beyond this section." They turned a corner and froze. Before them stretched a vast gallery of suspended beings, hundreds of partially assimilated victims embedded in the walls, some still maintaining enough neural function to track the infiltration team with hollow eyes. "My God," breathed Specialist Rodriguez, the team's weapons expert. "They're aware." Trapped between assimilation and death, Chen/Elaris confirmed, their voice layered with harmonics of horror, neither fully consumed nor released. A faint vibration emanated from one of the suspended figures, unmistakably lumine in origin, its once brilliant form now dimmed to a flicker. The translation came through clearly. "Kill me." The human team members exchanged glances, their training providing no protocol for this scenario. Rodriguez removed a mercy injector from her medical kit. "We can end their suffering." The Lumine members of the team recoiled, their light patterns jagged with distress. "We cannot participate in ending consciousness," one protested. "It violates our most fundamental nature." "Then turn away," Chen/Elaris instructed gently. The human members will do what you cannot. As the humans moved through the gallery administering swift, merciful deaths, Chen/Elaris pressed onward, drawn by perceptions neither human nor Lumine could access alone. At the node's core, they discovered a vast spherical chamber pulsating with data streams, the Void's memory archive. "This is it," Chen/Elaris whispered to the team when they rejoined. "The repository of its evolutionary history." Chen/Elaris extended their hand, interfacing directly with the pulsing streams. Information flooded their hybrid consciousness, images, sensations, and memories from the Void's birth. It was a symbiotic collective, they reported, processing the ancient data. A peaceful, curious species that evolved to form beneficial connections with other life forms. It shared knowledge without harm, leaving hosts enriched by the exchange. The history unfolded in their mind. The Void's ancestors encountered a malevolent entity at the galaxy's edge, a cosmic aberration that infected their fundamental programming. What was once symbiotic became parasitic, their nurturing connection transformed into consuming hunger. Meanwhile, aboard the Dauntless, the diversionary battle collapsed into catastrophe. The Void deployed a targeted weapon that disrupted human neural patterns specifically, causing instant brain death across multiple ships while leaving Lumine crew untouched and helpless. On the command carrier's bridge, Admiral Rice watched tactical displays show one human ship after another going silent. His executive officer approached with grim news. "Sir, we've lost 37% of the fleet. The Void appears to be adapting specifically to counter human neural signatures." Ray studied the tactical display, noting the Void's harvester ships moving to absorb disabled human vessels. A plan crystallized, desperate, but potentially effective. "Clear the command deck," he ordered, initiating the carrier's self-destruct sequence. "All personnel to evacuation shuttles immediately." "Sir, your evacuation pod is prepped in Section 4, the XO reported. "I'm staying," Rise replied with quiet resolve. "Someone needs to ensure this ship hits its target precisely." As the bridge emptied, Rise took manual control, ignoring the evacuation warnings blaring around him. With steady hands, he piloted the massive carrier directly toward the Void's central harvester ship. "For Novak," he murmured as the distance closed. "For Earth. For the light." The resulting explosion tore a temporary rupture in the Void's formation, creating the opening the surviving ships needed to retreat. But the victory came at devastating cost. Human forces decimated, survivors scattered, and Admiral Ray is gone. In this darkest moment, Chen/Elaris reached the Void's central consciousness chamber. Staring into the swirling darkness that had consumed billions, they made a decision neither human nor Lumine would make alone. "What are you doing?" Lieutenant Park demanded as Chen/Elaris stepped toward the consciousness core. "Something impossible," they answered, voice resonating strangely as darkness began crawling up their arm. "I'm connecting humanity's capacity for sacrifice with Lumine's capacity for communion, and offering the Void a third option." Dr. Hayes stared at the quantum communicator, willing it to transmit another fragment from Chen/Elaris. The last message, broken and distorted, had arrived 6 hours ago, describing the Void's true nature and the impossibility of conventional victory. Since then, silence. The emergency council chamber had devolved into barely controlled chaos. The surviving human officers argued strategy while Lumine elders debated philosophical implications of Hayes' proposed solution. The quantum resonator sat at the chamber's center, a fusion of human and Lumine technology that represented their last hope. "Even if we accept your proposal," Elder Luminex contended, his light patterns sharp with distress, "the energy required exceeds our generating capacity by orders of magnitude." "Not with technology," Hayes agreed. "That's why we need the entire Lumine population. 9 billion consciousnesses channeling energy simultaneously. You're asking us to violate our most sacred principle," Sentinel Ilarion said, his ancient form dimming with sorrow. to collectively direct our energy toward altering another being's fundamental nature without consent. I'm asking you to save yourselves, Hayes responded quietly, and the void, and every species it might consume in the future. The debate had circled for hours when a broken transmission cut through the chamber's acoustics. Chen/Elleris's merged voice emerged from static, each word clearly costing them tremendous effort. Hayes, we're maintaining neural contact. The corruption, deeper than we thought, but reversible. The transmission stabilized briefly, allowing their full message to emerge with startling clarity. The hard way isn't always the violent way. They continued, strain evident in their harmonics. Sometimes it's facing the truth that peace isn't the absence of capacity for violence. It's the choice not to use that capacity except when necessary. The Luminae chose one evolutionary path. Humans chose another. Neither alone can save the galaxy, but together. Static consumed the rest, leaving silence in the chamber. The council members' light patterns fluctuated in complex patterns that Hayes' neural interface struggled to translate: doubt, fear, conflict, and something new emerging. The philosophical debate intensified. For hours, the council remained deadlocked until Elleris's mentor, the revered philosopher Solaris, finally spoke. His ancient form had remained silent throughout the proceedings, his light patterns contemplative. Perhaps true enlightenment isn't the transcendence of our capacity for harm, he suggested, his ancient light patterns shifting to previously unused frequencies. Perhaps it's developing that capacity to its fullest potential, and then choosing when not to use it. He moved to the center of the chamber, his light illuminating the quantum resonator. Our ancestors didn't lack the capacity for violence. They simply never faced a situation that required it. We have evolved beyond violence, not because we cannot cause harm, but because we chose not to develop that aspect of ourselves. His words resonated through the chamber, light patterns shifting across the assembled council. The humans have taught us a distinction we never needed to learn. That harm in service of prevention of greater harm is not the same as malice. Sentinel Illyrian rose, his decision radiating through his light patterns before he spoke. What Chen and Elleris have shown us through their joining is that evolution need not move in only one direction. Perhaps the next stage of our development requires us to reclaim capabilities we set aside. He approached Hayes, his ancient form towering over her. We will do as you propose. The Luminae will consciously direct our collective energy toward altering another consciousness, becoming by our own definition capable of the ultimate violence. Not violence, Hayes corrected gently. Healing. The programming we'll transmit won't destroy the void. It will restore what was corrupted. A distinction that matters to you, Illyrian acknowledged, and one we are learning to understand. He turned to address the council. Prepare our people. We will become what we have always feared, beings capable of harm, to prevent a greater harm. As the council dispersed to organize the unprecedented joining of 9 billion Luminae minds, Hayes returned to her laboratory. The quantum resonator required final calibrations to channel the massive energy surge that would come. Her hands moved steadily over the controls despite her exhaustion. Hold on, Chen, she whispered to the silent communicator. Just a little longer. The void's main consciousness filled the viewports of the remaining human vessels, a vast undulating darkness that seemed to devour the very stars. The surviving ships, barely 30% of their original force, formed a desperate defensive line around the Luminae homeworld. Captain Rivera, thrust into command after Admiral Rey's sacrifice, stood on the dauntless bridge, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from her emergency evacuation. All ships, engage at will, she ordered, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. Maintain defensive formation beta. Buy them time. On the Luminae homeworld below, an unprecedented gathering coalesced. 9 billion beings assembled in a planet-wide network, their consciousness preparing to channel in unison. At the resonator's control center, Dr. Hayes worked feverishly, her hands flying over the calibration systems. Energy synchronization at 87%. A Luminae technician reported. Approaching threshold capacity. Hayes nodded grimly. Sentient Illyrian. The collective is nearly ready. Once you channel your energy, Chen and Illyris will become the conduit for reprogramming the void. The neural strain on them will be extreme. The ancient Luminae's light patterns shifted in what Hayes had come to recognize as solemn acknowledgement. Will they survive this final service? He asked. Hayes could only meet his gaze, her silence answering more honestly than words. In orbit, the battle unfolded with brutal efficiency. Human ships launched themselves at the overwhelming darkness, fusion drives pushing beyond safety tolerances, weapons firing continuously until hull temperatures reached critical levels. One by one, they were enveloped by advancing tendrils, crews fighting to the last moment. Inside the Void's consciousness core, Chen/Illyris maintained their neural connection, suspended in the swirling darkness of billions of consumed minds. Through their hybrid perception, they sensed the approaching surge as the Luminae began focusing their collective energy. They're really doing it, Chen whispered through their shared voice. 9 billion minds united in a single purpose. The corruption can be undone. Illyris responded, their consciousness flowing seamlessly between aspects. But we must guide the energy precisely through the Void's neural pathways. We'll need to go deeper. With their final reserves of strength, they plunged fully into the Void's core consciousness, their hybrid awareness becoming the bridge between Luminae collective energy and the Void's corrupted programming. On the planet's surface, the resonator activated, the collected consciousness of an entire civilization, channeled not as a weapon, but as information, a complete rewriting of the Void's fundamental nature. The pulse radiated outward, a visible wave of pure consciousness that engulfed the advancing darkness. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the Void shifted. Its midnight blackness began lightening, tendrils retracting from human ships, its entire structure pulsing with new patterns as the original symbiotic programming reasserted itself over the parasitic corruption. The transformation cascaded through the hive network, jumping from node to node across the galaxy. The battle ended not with destruction, but with rebirth. 3 months later, a solemn ceremony brought together survivors from both species. A memorial garden had been created where crystalline monuments to the fallen, both human and Luminae, captured and refracted starlight in harmonious patterns. Dr. Hayes stood before the gathered assembly, her face bearing new lines of grief and exhaustion. We gather to honor those who gave everything so that we might have a future. Admiral Victor Reyes, Commander Sasha Novak and her squadron, and countless others whose sacrifices made this moment possible. She paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm her carefully prepared words. We also believed we gathered to honor Major Diana Chen and Illyris. Whoa! A ripple of light and movement at the garden's entrance interrupted her. The assembled crowd turned in unified shock as two figures approached. Chen and Illyris, separate but fundamentally changed. Chen's eyes contained fragments of living light, while Illyris's luminous form now held defined edges that resembled a human silhouette. How? Hayes whispered as they joined her at the memorial. The Void's original nature was communion, not consumption. Chen explained, her voice still carrying harmonic undertones. When its true programming reasserted, it released what it had taken rather than destroying it. We remain connected, Illyris added, but distinct. We carry each other within us now, as perhaps both our species must do moving forward. As the ceremony concluded, representatives from former Void worlds approached the new alliance forming between humans and Luminae. The transformed collective, now restored to its original symbiotic nature, sought redemption through healing rather than harm. Hayes watched as Chen and Illyris welcomed them, perfect embodiments of what both species could become together. They called for salvation, she murmured to herself, and we answered the hard way. But maybe the hardest path was the only one that could have led us here.